The vinyl seat of the bus station bench was cracked and cold, even in the humid Houston night. The flickering neon sign of the station across the street cast a sickly yellow glow on my hands, which were clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. He had left me here, my son, my Tyler, had driven me to this desolate place, put my single suitcase on the curb, and said the words that would forever be seared into my soul. "You're just dead weight, Mom." Then he had gotten back into the shiny SUV my money had bought, and with his wife Nancy sitting silently in the passenger seat, he had driven away. He never turned around. He left me, his 71-year-old mother, at a bus station in the middle of the night without so much as a hug. They thought they had disposed of their problem, jettisoned the dead weight that was holding their shiny new life back. They thought my grief over losing my husband had made me feeble, my silence in the face of their cruelty a sign of my surrender. They didn't know that in that moment of absolute abandonment, as I sat shivering on that cold vinyl bench, the woman they thought they knew died, and in her place a new woman was born, one forged in betrayal, fueled by a cold, quiet rage, and armed with a truth they had long forgotten. I still owned the house. They had left me at a bus station, but I was about to send them on a one-way trip to rock bottom. It all began, as these slow-motion devastations so often do, with an act of love born from a place of profound loss. When my husband Frank passed away, the silence in our sprawling Texas ranch house became a living entity. It was a constant, heavy companion that followed me from room to room, a suffocating blanket of grief. I was adrift in an ocean of loneliness, and the echoes of my life with him were a constant, painful reminder of everything I had lost. Tyler and Nancy, married for just over 2 years, were living in a cramped, overpriced apartment near the Galleria, perpetually complaining about the rent, their student loans, the impossibility of saving for a future. My mother's heart, still foolishly programmed to nurture and to fix, saw a solution that I believed would save us all. I would have company, the sound of life to fill the dreadful quiet. They would have a beautiful, spacious home, rent-free, a chance to get on their feet. I remember the day I offered it to them, my voice full of a hope that now tastes like ashes in my mouth. We were on the back porch, the one Frank and I had screened in ourselves, sipping iced tea against the humid Houston heat. "Why don't you two move in with me?" I'd said. "There's so much space here. It's too much for one old woman. You could save money and I wouldn't have to be so alone." Nancy's eyes, a cool, pale shade of green, had lit up with a speed that should have been a warning. "Oh, Margaret," she'd cooed, her voice a perfect performance of sweet reluctance. "We couldn't possibly impose on you like that. It's far too generous." Tyler, my son, my only child, had played his part with devastating skill. He'd wrapped an arm around my shoulder, a gesture that felt like a comfort then, but feels like a cage in retrospect. "Mom, are you sure? We don't want to be a burden." I had waved their protests away, so desperate to feel needed again, to fill the echoing silence of my life. "Nonsense," I'd said, my heart swelling with a misguided sense of purpose. "This house needs a family. It needs you." And so they came, with their moving boxes and their hollow smiles, and their empty promises. "We'll take such good care of you, Mom," Tyler had sworn, kissing my cheek. I believed him. I wanted to believe him, more than I had ever wanted anything. I thought I was inviting my family home, to heal together. I didn't realize I was simply opening the door to a pair of smiling invaders who saw my grief as an opportunity and my love as a resource to be plundered. The occupation of my home began not with a single battle, but with 1,000 small quiet surrenders. The first thing to go was the wallpaper in the dining room. It was a soft floral print that Frank and I had picked out together on a rare weekend away, a symbol of our shared life. I came home from a trip to Walmart one afternoon to find Nancy peeling it off in long, satisfying strips, a look of intense concentration on her face. "What do you think, Margaret?" she'd asked, not waiting for an answer. "I'm thinking a nice, sophisticated gray. It will make the room feel so much bigger and more modern." I felt a lump form in my throat. But Frank and I chose that paper together. I'd whispered, the words feeling small and powerless. I know, she'd said with a bright, dismissive smile, and it was lovely for its time, but tastes change. We need to update the space to reflect all of us. All of us. That became their justification, their mantra, for the slow, systematic erasure of my life from the walls of my own home. Next came the furniture, the sturdy, comfortable armchair, where Frank had read the paper every morning, was replaced by a sleek, low-slung leather thing that looked like it belonged in a corporate office lobby. The old one was just so worn out. Mom, Tyler had explained, his voice laced with a condescending pity. This one is Italian leather. It's an investment in the property. My collection of family photos on the mantelpiece. Tyler's school pictures. Our wedding portrait, a faded photo of my own parents on their wedding day, were gradually taken down. We're just decluttering, Nancy would say, replacing them with a single large, abstract canvas of angry-looking red streaks. It creates a more sophisticated focal point. Every change felt like a small death, a quiet negation of my past. The injustice of it all began as a slow burn in my chest. This was my home, filled with the ghosts of my happiest memories, and they were exorcising them one by one, redecorating my life, as if it were a fixer-upper they had bought on the cheap. Even the food, the very heart of my role as a mother and homemaker, became a front in their campaign. My Sunday meatloaf, a recipe Tyler had once begged for, was now deemed too heavy and full of preservatives. My pot of morning grits was met with a lecture from Nancy about empty calories. They embarked on a series of ever-changing, expensive diets, filling the refrigerator with foods I didn't recognize and couldn't pronounce. The comforting smell of my home was replaced by the alien scent of steamed vegetables and simmering resentment. I was being made to feel like a relic in my own kitchen, my love and care dismissed as outdated and unhealthy. I found myself retreating more and more to my bedroom, the one space they had not yet conquered. I would sit on the edge of my bed, the bed I had shared with Frank for 4 decades, and listen to the sounds of my life being dismantled, the scrape of furniture being moved, the murmur of their voices planning the next update, the confident, happy laughter that never included me. I told myself I was being overly sensitive, that this was the price of not being alone, but the loneliness I felt then, surrounded by people who were actively erasing me, was 1,000 times more profound and painful than the quiet solitude I had known before. The subtle conquest of my home's decor was merely the prelude to a much more audacious and devastating campaign, the takeover of my finances. The maneuver was executed with the chilling precision of a corporate raid, all under the guise of loving, familial concern. They staged the intervention one evening, at the new uncomfortable dining table they had insisted on buying. Tyler had a laptop open, and Nancy had a folder of my own bills spread out before her. Mom, Tyler began, his voice a carefully calibrated instrument of solemnity. We were just going through some of your paperwork, and honestly, we're a little worried. It seems like a lot for you to manage on your own. Nancy chimed in, her voice a soft, persuasive murmur. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Margaret. What if you missed a payment? The penalties can be so steep. We think it would be so much easier if we helped you organize everything. My defenses immediately went up. Frank and I had been diligent savers. He had worked 2 jobs for years to ensure that I would be left financially secure, independent. My savings, my pension, they were my last bastion of autonomy, the one part of my life that was still unequivocally mine. I've been managing my own finances for over 40 years. Tyler, I said, my voice tight, I know what I'm doing. Of course you do, Mom. He soothed, his tone so placating it felt like an insult. No one is questioning your ability. This is about family helping family. It's about letting us take some of the burden off your shoulders, so you can relax. They were masters of this emotional blackmail. They framed their power grab as an act of love, of filial duty. To refuse would be to seem suspicious, paranoid and ungrateful. It would mean starting a fight I was too weary to wage, and so against every screaming instinct in my soul, I relented. The next day at the bank, was a surreal out-of-body experience. Tyler, holding my elbow in a gesture of feigned support, did all the talk. He told the bank manager a beautifully crafted story about creating a consolidated family estate account to make things easier for his beloved mother. I signed the documents where he told me to, my signature feeling like a forgery of my own. And just like that, the keys to my financial kingdom were in their hands. For the first few weeks, they maintained the illusion of responsibility. The utility bills were paid, but then the bank statements, which they started trying to intercept, began to reveal the truth. There were charges from high-end restaurants in downtown Houston. There were online shopping sprees for designer clothes. There was a weekend trip to Seattle that I only learned about through a photo Nancy posted on social media. I found a statement they had carelessly left on the kitchen counter and confronted Tyler, my hand shaking as I pointed to a charge for several $1,000s from an electronics store. A massive wall-sized television now dominated the living room. "What is this, Tyler?" I asked. "It's an upgrade, Mom," he said, not even looking away from the screen. "An investment in the property. It increases the resale value for all of us." The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. My life savings, the money Frank and I had scrimped and saved for our old age, was being used to invest in a house they were living in for free, and I was being told it was for my benefit. I was no longer a mother. I was I was the silent, involuntary backer of their increasingly extravagant lifestyle. The injustice of it was a constant, dull ache in my chest. I had given them my home, my trust, and now, my financial security. I was funding my own marginalization, paying for the very chains that were binding me, and they had the audacity to call it family. With my home redecorated to their tastes and my finances under their control, Nancy began the final phase of her campaign, my complete and utter isolation. She seemed to operate with the cold, calculating precision of a general, identifying and neutralizing every potential source of outside support I had. My friends, the women who had been my lifeline since Frank's death, were the first to be cut off. My weekly mahjong game with my best friend Monica and 2 other ladies was a sacred ritual. It was a few hours of laughter, shared stories, and a blessed respite from the escalating tension in my own home. "Mom," Nancy announced one Tuesday, her tone bright and non-negotiable, "Tyler and I have decided to start hosting a weekly dinner party for some of his work contacts. We'll be using the dining room on Wednesday nights, so you'll have to find another time for your little game." I was floored. "But Nancy, we've played on Wednesdays for almost 20 years. I protested weakly. "Well, times change," she replied with a dismissive shrug. "This is important for Tyler's career." It was a lie, of course. The dinner party happened exactly once, but its purpose was served. My mahjong game, my small circle of joy, was effectively disbanded. I was forced to make a series of humiliating phone calls to my friends, offering flimsy excuses that I knew they didn't believe. Monica, my dearest and most stubborn friend, was not so easily dissuaded. She knew something was deeply wrong. She kept calling, trying to make plans, but Nancy always had a new, more elaborate excuse ready. I would listen from my bedroom, a helpless prisoner, as Nancy's voice, a masterpiece of feigned concern, wove a tapestry of my supposed decline. "Oh, Monica, I'm so sorry. Margaret is just not up to having visitors today. She's been so frail and tired," or even more cruelly, "her memory has been a little off lately. The doctor says it's best to keep her environment calm and not to overstimulate her." It was a diabolically brilliant strategy. She was not only cutting me off from my support system but also actively constructing a narrative of my incompetence. She was discrediting me in advance, ensuring that if I ever did manage to cry for help, I would be dismissed as a confused, senile old woman. The world outside my front door became a distant, unattainable land. They had sold my car, claiming it was unsafe for me to drive, leaving me completely dependent on them for transportation, a service they rarely, if ever, provide. A trip to the Target for my own toiletries became a complex negotiation that usually ended with, "We'll try to get to it this weekend, Margaret." My world shrank until it was contained within the 4 walls of the house, and within those walls I was an inmate. The loneliness was no longer a dull ache. It was a sharp, stabbing pain. It was the excruciating loneliness of being erased while still breathing. They no longer bothered with the pretense of including me in their lives. They would talk over me, around me, about me, as if I were a piece of furniture that happened to be breathing. Their cruelty became casual, a part of the daily routine. Tyler would helpfully explain the plot of a television show to me as if I were a child. Nancy would organize my bookshelf, donating books she deemed too old-fashioned. I was being infantilized and erased, my identity worn away by the constant daily friction of their disrespect. I was a ghost in my own home, haunting the memories of a life they were systematically bulldozing to make way for their own opulent, empty future. The pretense of being a happy blended family had long since evaporated, leaving behind the raw, ugly truth of our arrangement. I was no longer a mother they were caring for. I was an obstacle and an unpaid servant. My existence in the house was tolerated only as long as I remained useful and invisible. My days fell into a bleak, joyless. I would wake before them and tiptoe into the kitchen to find the sink overflowing with the dirty dishes from their previous night's dinner. They would leave them there, a silent, entitled command, and I, out of a lifetime of habit and a desperate, pathetic need to avoid conflict, would wash them. I would tidy the living room they had cluttered, fold the laundry they had left in the dryer, and dust the furniture they had bought with my money. I was the ghost who cleaned up after the living, my efforts unnoticed and unacknowledged. If I did something for myself, it was met with open disdain. The smell of the simple grits I'd cook for my own breakfast would cause Nancy to wrinkle her nose and open a window, as if I had contaminated her pristine air. My presence was an imposition. They would walk past me in the hallway without a word of greeting. They would have loud, animated conversations on the phone, laughing and making plans, while I sat in the same room, completely ignored. I was a piece of furniture that breathed, a silent witness to the vibrant life they were living at my expense. The verbal slights became more frequent, more pointed. They were no longer veiled insults. They were direct shots. Tyler took a particular, cruel pleasure in making me feel stupid. "It's an app, Margaret," he'd say with an exaggerated sigh. If I asked a question about his phone, "You probably wouldn't understand." Nancy, on the other hand, specialized in a kind of dismissive pity. "Oh, Mom, don't worry your pretty little head about it," she'd say if I asked about a piece of mail that had come for me, before tossing it in the trash. I overheard their conversations more and more, not because I was snooping, but because they no longer bothered to lower their voices. They saw me as so insignificant that my presence didn't even register. "I can't wait until we can sell this place," I heard Nancy say to Tyler one night. "We could get a condo downtown, something with a view, something that's actually ours." Tyler's reply chilled me to the bone. "We just have to be patient," the lawyer said. "If we can prove she's incompetent, we can get conservatorship. It'll be much cleaner that way." Incompetent. Conservatorship. They were actively plotting to have me declared legally unfit to manage my own affairs, to strip me of my last remaining rights. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were actively working to accelerate my social and legal death. The full scope of their betrayal was finally laid bare. This wasn't about them needing a place to stay. This was a long, calculated con. They had moved in with the intention of taking everything: my home, my money, my freedom, and finally, my legal personhood. The love I had for my son, already a bruised and battered thing, shriveled into a cold, hard knot of pure survival. They had misjudged me. They saw an old, grieving widow. They didn't see the woman who had survived poverty, who had nursed a dying husband, who had raised a child on her own strength. They didn't know that beneath the soft, quiet exterior was a spine of steel, and it was beginning to stiffen. The breaking point, the moment the dam of my silent suffering finally burst, came on a cold, rainy afternoon in late autumn. I was in my small, grim room, trying to mend a seam on one of my old cardigans, when I heard the mail slot clang shut. A few minutes later, Nancy came to my door and tossed a stack of mail onto my cot. "This is all for you," she said dismissively. Before walking away, I sorted through the bills and junk mail until my fingers landed on a thick, glossy envelope with no return address. I tore it open. Inside was a full-color brochure. The words on the front, written in a cheerful looping font, read, "Silver Creek Meadows, a new beginning in your golden years." My blood ran cold. It was a brochure for an assisted living facility, an expensive one. A page was dog-eared, and a floor plan for a studio suite was circled with a red marker. Beneath it, Nancy had scribbled some calculations, monthly fees, and a note, "Sell house ASAP." There it was, their plan, laid out in black and white, and cheerful, condescending color. The casual cruelty of it, the sheer audacity of having the brochure sent to my own home, and then carelessly tossing it to me, ignited a rage so fierce, it burned away every last shred of my fear and despair. I grabbed the brochure, my hands shaking not with weakness, but with a sudden surging power. I stormed out of my room, and into the living room, where Tyler and Nancy were watching television, lounging on the sofa they had bought with my money. I threw the brochure onto the glass coffee table in front of them. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice raw with a fury I didn't know I possessed. Nancy barely glanced at it, a smug smirk playing on her lips. "It's a solution, Mom," she said, her voice cold and "a place where you can be properly cared for, since you're obviously unable to live independently." "Unable to live independently?" I cried, the injustice of her words stealing my breath. "I was living independently just fine, until you two moved in and systematically destroyed my life. This is my house." That's when Tyler stood up, his face a mask of annoyed impatience. "Mom, calm down, you're getting worked up over nothing. This is for your own good. You're not safe here alone." "I'm not alone," I screamed. "I have you, my own son, who is trying to ship me off to a home, so he can sell my house and live off the profits." The truth, spoken so plainly, seemed to infuriate him. "You know what, Mom?" he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You're right, we do want to sell the house, because you are holding us back. Your old furniture, your old ways, your constant neediness. It's a weight around our necks. We can't move forward with our lives with you in the picture." That was the moment he pronounced my sentence. "You're just dead weight, Mom." A bird, the word hung in the air, a final brutal verdict on my entire existence. "We're taking you somewhere tomorrow," Tyler said, his voice now cold and devoid of all emotion. "A place where you can get some rest, a respite care facility, just for a little while, until we can figure things out." I knew what that meant. It was a lie. It was the first step in their plan to have me put away. They wanted me out of the picture. Fine, I would remove myself, but I would do it on my own terms, and I would take the entire picture with me.